Welcome back to Ring of Fire. I'm Mike Papantonio here with Farron Cousins, editor of the National Trial Lawyer magazine, one of the biggest trial law magazines in the country. Recently, an analyst for Goldman Sachs admitted that curing diseases is actually bad for business. He actually said that. Tells you everything you need to know about how screwed up our healthcare system is. More importantly, it tells you how the thugs on Wall Street regard us generally where it comes to making big profits. You know, I read this. I had to read it twice because it was so callous, Farron. This character is so, what he's talking about is, you know, if we cure cancer, we're not going to have all that money coming in for things like chemotherapy and all this money that goes into treating cancer victims. He actually was very down on the idea of gene therapy to cure diseases not because it wasn't going to be profitable from that standpoint, but it was going to destroy all the profits in long-term care for people who are dying from things like cancer. What's your take on this?
Yeah, he says, you know, the idea of one-shot cures, yeah, it's attractive, but for the love of God, we've got to take care of these poor bankers by getting people to come back and, you know, every month with whether it's dialysis or chemotherapy or whatever it is that everybody has to keep coming back for it. And it's funny, you know, Lee Camp did a phenomenal job on this story.
Lee did a great job.
Published in Truthdig. And he also mentions, you know, there was this old comedy routine from Chris Rock from 1999 where he said, you know, they're never going to cure diseases because there's no money in that. And at the time, it was a humorous observation. It was funny because you didn't think it would happen. But here, this guy from Goldman Sachs, Salveen Richter is his name.
Yeah, Salveen Richter.
Absolutely said, this is bad for business.
So the whole time that we thought it was a joke, the thugs up on Wall Street, they weren't laughing.
Right.
They were worried about, gee, we really might cure something like cancer. We might cure MS, and we might cure these long-term diseases. You know, the problem is this. Part of this issue is what's happened is the hospital corporations have become so big. You've got hospital corporations that run public health all over the country. Add to that the monstrosity that we call the pharmaceutical industry. Those two entities, they benefit big from long-term care. If you cure cancer, you don't have the pharmaceutical industry, you know, making a gazillion dollars selling cancer drugs. Same with hospitals. So these hospital corporations have become this big monster that we have to keep feeding. And that's what this guy's talking about. He's talking about, you know, we're making a lot of money in the healthcare industry because you got all the baby boomers coming through. And a lot of the money we're making is that long-term care kind of issue.
Well, you know, a lot of questions that came up from this is just the fact of why does Wall Street even care what happens in the pharmaceutical industry? Why do these bankers care what happens in the hospital industry? And it's because people don't understand how entwined everything has become in this society in terms of businesses. Wall Street banks fund these hospitals. They fund the pharmaceutical industry. So Big Pharma has to make a profit because part of it's got to go back to the big bankers. They do the same thing with the gun industry. You know, these big banks are entwined with them. They're entwined with Monsanto and DuPont and Dow and everybody. So whatever happens, and that's one of the reasons these banking lobbyists push for lax regulations on the oil industry, something seemingly unrelated. Well, it's because they help fund it. They finance it.
Well, in this story, though, what they're actually saying, they're actually responding, this freak with Goldman Sachs, that, by the way, one of the freaks that probably should have been held responsible for the 2008 burn down, where Goldman Sachs starts selling junk. They start selling junk stocks to their best customers while they are getting rid of their stock. At the same time, they know what's going on. The inside information is everybody there with Goldman Sachs understands the burn down is getting ready to take place, but they're telling their customers, buy more, because they're still making a lot of money on this. None of them go to prison. Not one of these freaks went to prison. So now the freaks are out there saying, gee whiz, we hope that there's no long-term, you know, serious disease solution here because we're not going to sell enough drugs, we're not going to have enough hospital stays, and the healthcare industry is going to suffer. And we, Goldman Sachs, are going to suffer because we're so invested in that. What kind of friggin' ghoul even says that? What kind of ghoul even thinks that much less says it. Well, Goldman Sachs. Let me just tell you something. Goldman Sachs. Yeah, this one little interest. I just got back from Europe, and I was spending a good fair amount of time in Holland talking to the folks about their banking system. And of course, their big target is the Rothschilds. The Rothschilds virtually own a piece of everything having to do with banking. And Goldman Sachs has become that Rothschild in the United States where they own it all. I mean, you might think it's a mom and pop bank you're doing business with, but the money flows back to Goldman Sachs. It's something that we've just got to get control over.
Well, and when you look at this from the healthcare perspective too, and you wonder, it seems like we've kind of hit a stale period in time here in terms of medical advancements here in the United States. We haven't cured anything recently. We haven't seen any major breakthroughs. I mean, hell, Cuba has come very close
to our same state.
To having a lung cancer cure.
Yeah.
South Korea is leading the world in stem cell therapy, regenerating, organs and vital tissues.
It's gonna hurt. It's going to hurt the hospital industry. It's going to hurt the pharmaceutical industry.
They've come close to being able to regenerate human teeth using stem cells. And here in the United States, it's all about profit, not about the cure.
Goldman Sachs, just another ugly story from those freaks on Wall Street. Republican Congressman Mo Brooks from Alabama recently said that the rocks falling into the ocean, not climate change, but rocks falling into the ocean is the reason for the rising sea levels across the planet. And as I read this story, I thought most of the rocks are falling out of his head.
Yeah.
But I mean, he actually made this statement. It was in a hearing with a credible scientist. And the scientist is looking at him like, what? What? This is a real scientist across from the table. And this idiot from Alabama, Mo Brooks, says, well, it's not really just climate change. It's rocks falling into the ocean. And I wish somebody in that hearing said, Mr. Brooks, most of those rocks probably have fallen out of your damn head. What is your take on this story?
This is the kind of idiocy that we're up against, though.
Yeah.
When we try to make any kind of progress on the issue of climate change, we're going to have either an Inhofe holding a snowball saying, well, this can't exist if climate change is real, or even worse, because this is the dumbest thing I've ever heard to argue that climate change is real, that it's rocks. The White Cliffs of Dover are falling into the ocean. And dirt. He went on to say there's just dirt from rivers that goes into the ocean, and it's just making the sea level rise by 3 or 4 inches across the globe.
This is a guy who's probably never traveled anywhere. I mean, if he's been out of Birmingham, Alabama, I'd be surprised.